Hey, I'm John. I'm a professional MCAT tutor and resident in plastic surgery. Before I went to medical school, I had to take the MCAT 4 times before I figured it out. Then I worked for some of the big national companies, tutoring students and showing them what I'm about to walk you through. If you want to see myself or the co-tutor on this channel go through all of the AAMC full-length exam questions and passages and break them down, click the first link in the bio. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. So now it's time for us to look at the big bag CARS section of this exam. We're going to start with passage number 1. So the way that these CARS exams or these CARS breakdowns are going to work is generally Maggie or myself will walk through it. At the end, we're going to write out our own main idea, and we may teach some of the strategies throughout. But if you are familiar with our CARS strategies, we kind of focus on 4 things. We call those the core 4, the 4 competencies. So these are the 4 things that have repeatedly shown to be tested on the MCAT. The first is the main idea. That's what we'll write out every single time. The second is the author's tone. The third is the author's intention and motivation. Someone's going to say I/M. And the fourth is going to be the arguments within the passage. So while at various aspects of your CARS training, you may be writing down all 4 of those and identifying those. For the sake of speed and for the sake of this is probably what you're going to do when you actually take the test, we're only going to write out the main idea, and we'll try to bake as many of the other core 4 into that main idea as we can. We'll bake in tone with some adjectives. We'll structure the phrasing of the main idea to include some tone or some intentions and motivations, and then we'll use some of the larger supporting arguments, or sometimes I'll even bullet point list them out below. But you'll see as you go through this exam and the following exams exactly how we do that. This is a great room to practice, and make sure that you're writing out your own main idea before you are watching our videos. And if you're not writing out your main idea whenever you're taking the exam, I highly encourage it, because the best way to improve from one test to the next or from one passage to the next is for you to be able to compare your main idea with the correct main idea and actually see what mistakes you were making, because it's really difficult to put yourself back in that proper mode of thinking once you've already seen all the questions and seen the ones that you've missed. So without further ado, let's tackle this CARS passage. Always read the title first for CARS, and it is titled A Sociologic Study of the Oligarchical Tendencies of Modern Democracy. This is not going to be fun. Let's do it. Why not? Passage number 1 says, the practical ideal of democracy consists in the self-government of the masses in conformity with the decisions of popular assemblies. So they're just describing democracy here, right? Ruling by the people. But while this system limits the extension of the principle of delegation, it fails to provide any guarantee against the formation of an oligarchical ruling clique. So the way that he's phrasing this, right, fails to provide guarantee against or protection, makes it sound like the author dislikes this oligarchical ruling clique, or anything that's going to be too foot on the throat, top-down ruling governance. Undoubtedly, it deprives the natural leaders of their quality as functionaries, for this quality is transferred to the people themselves. So he's saying rather than an oligarchy or a dictator ruling, now we have a democracy ruling. The crowd, however, is always subject to suggestion, being readily influenced by the eloquency of popular orators. Moreover, direct government by the people, admitting of no serious discussions or thoughtful deliberations, greatly facilitates sudden insurrections of all kinds by individuals who are exceptionally bold, energetic, adroit. I don't really know what that word means. Adroit? I sound like a redneck. Adroit? Anywho's, what they're trying to say here is that a really outgoing individual can essentially influence the whole crowd. And now, even though we're ruled by the crowd, ruled by the group or the crowd, technically, really you're just kind of ruled by the loud individual that's riling everybody up, because we're all looking for someone to follow. So he's essentially saying it is a good attempt at fixing a problem of dictatorships and oligarchies, but it is not properly carried out. And I imagine the rest of this passage is going to be the author outlining why he or she thinks that's the case. It is easier to dominate a large crowd than a small audience. That sounds like an argument, kind of, right? The adhesion of the crowd is tumultuous, summary, and unconditional. Once the suggestions have taken effect, the crowd does not readily tolerate contradiction from a small minority, and still less from isolated individuals. So the crowd is not very amenable to suggestions. A great multitude assembled within the small area is unquestionably more accessible to panic alarms, to unreflective enthusiasm, and the like than a small meeting, whose numbers can quietly discuss matters among themselves. So an argument that you, like, essentially if we're going to do like some paragraph summaries, in this first paragraph we see that like the author dislikes rulers, so that includes like the oligarchy, also includes dictatorships, and it includes democracy here. The whole passage is, so far as the author talking about how democracy just invokes like a de facto ruler. And here in the second one, he is saying that he or she, was it a he or she? I don't know. The author is saying that she prefers small groups over large groups, right? So we're steadily building this main idea, and the reason that she prefers these small groups, or he prefers these small groups, is because they are more amenable to suggestions, will think a little bit better, whereas large groups will kind of like stomp out the fire quickly as like dissension. We definitely see that in our political landscape in America. It is a fact of everyday experience that enormous public meetings commonly carry resolutions by acclamation or by general assent, while these same assemblies, if divided into small sections, say of 50 people each, would be much more guarded in their assent. So that's just more support here. Great party congresses, in which the elite of the membership are present, usually act in this way. Words and actions are far less deliberately weighed by the crowd than by the individuals of the little groups of which crowd is composed. So more support here that small groups are better than large groups. The fact is incontestable, a manifestation of the pathology of the crowd. So pathology, incontestable. We're getting some pretty harsh tone here. The individual disappears in the multitude, and therewith disappears also personality and sense of responsibility. All right, that's kind of like a bold statement. Not really a ton of support following it, that like personality and sense of responsibility amiss, but that is how the author kind of capstones that paragraph. The most formidable argument against the sovereignty of the masses, so even with 2 paragraphs worth of saying small groups are better than large groups, we have the most formidable argument is, however, derived from the mechanical and technical impossibility of its realization. The sovereign masses are incapable of undertaking the most necessary resolutions. So this means like you get a big group together, they can't decide what to do, which I can't imagine, because like my wife and I, we can never decide where to eat. I truly don't care where we go. Please just pick. The impotence of direct democracy, like the power of indirect democracy, is a direct outcome of the influence of its numbers. So impotence meaning like its inability to act. You know, if we need to go to war, if we need to impart tariffs, like the direct democracy, the large group won't be able to make that decision. They'll be disagreeing the whole time. It is obvious that a gigantic number of people belonging to a unitary organization cannot do practical work using a system of direct discussion. You get 10,000 people, they can't talk to each other. The regular holding of deliberate assemblies of 1,000 members encounters the gravest difficulties in respect to room and distance. From the topographical point of view, such an assembly would become altogether impossible if the members numbered 10,000. So this person's saying that you couldn't have 10,000 people all watching or attending an event, which is not true for us today, right? But anyways, even if we imagine the means of communication become much better than those that now exist, Zoom, how would it be possible to assemble such a multitude in a given place at a stated time and with the frequency demanded by the exigencies of political life? So this must be like pre-internet, because they're saying it's impossible to gather people. In addition, it must be considered the physiological impossibility, even for the most powerful orators, of making themselves heard by a crowd of 10,000 people. So this must be before microphones too. So this is an old passage. There are, however, other reasons of a technical and administrative character that render impossible the direct self-government of large groups. So here's another reason why this is not going to work. So at the beginning, it's like, this is why I dislike it. And then these paragraphs are like logistics challenges, why it's not going to work so far. If Peter wrongs Paul, it is out of the question that all the other citizens should hasten to the spot to undertake a personal examination of the matter in dispute and to take the part of Paul against Peter. Meaning, like, if Peter hit Paul and we wanted to prosecute Paul, well, if we were ruled by the masses, then we would expect everybody to come together to execute punishment over Paul or over Peter. By parity of reasoning, in the modern democratic state, it is impossible for the collectivity to undertake the direct settlement of all the controversies that may arise. So that's just kind of what I said there. So if you haven't written out your main idea, take the time to pause this and write it out now, and I'm going to write mine. So my main idea is that democracy is impractical due to logistics challenges, influence, and the fact that small groups are better than large groups. So using that main idea, I'm going to try to answer as many of these questions as I can. You usually get about 80% of them with the main idea. And that's like the 80-20 rule. So I will bring this guy with me, and we'll see if what I've been teaching students for years is true. All right. So question number 1 says, which of the following statements from the passage most strongly indicates that the passage was written prior to the 21st century? So this is pretty much saying, like, which of these would, if we put on our modern thinking cap, which of these is possible in the 21st century or is incorrect in the 21st century? A says the regular holding of deliberative assemblies of 1,000 members encounters the gravest difficulty in respect of room and distance. Well, that's kind of what we talked about with, like, this person didn't know about the internet or Zoom, right? Ask yourself, would it be hard to have 1,000 people assembled together? I mean, think about TV, think about YouTube, think about all these different ways that we have thousands, millions of people assembled together all the time. So A is going to be our right answer, but let's keep reading. B says the crowd is readily influenced by the eloquence of popular orators. Does that still happen today? That's a better way to rephrase this, is which of these still happens today, or which of these does not still happen today? B still happens today, right? We still get influenced by people. Funny story, one time Maggie was in med school and somebody approached her and referred to her as a medfluencer. Interesting. C says these same assemblies, if divided into small sections, would be much more guarded in their assent. I mean, that's still true. You know, the author would agree that that is still true, that smaller groups are going to be much more amenable to change and things of the nature. And so really what we're doing here is we're looking at our main idea and we're saying which of these 3 things would the author think is no longer an issue. Is it going to be logistics? Is it going to be influence? Or is it going to be small groups are more effective than large groups? It's going to be the logistics one, right? Like, we have the technology to overcome some of the logistical barriers to democracy these days. D says the sovereign masses are incapable of undertaking the most necessary resolutions. That is still going to be true, right? Like, you still get a large group of people, they're not going to agree, they're not going to make a decision. So the correct answer is going to be answer choice A, because we have the internet and phones and stuff. Number 2 says, which of the following assertions in the passage does the author support with a practical example? So I'm going to rephrase this one as, which of these arguments has a real example? So there's several types of support. Support on the MCAT can look like just talking about it more extensively, but that's not necessarily the only types of support that are found on the MCAT. You can have just like discussing it at length. That's one type of support. You can have quotations or citing somebody, or you can also provide like an actual scenario. So this is asking for an actual scenario. The only one I remember is the Peter robs Paul thing, but we can go back and see. A says direct government by the people greatly facilitates sudden insurrections of all kinds by individuals who are exceptionally bold, energetic, and adroit, whatever, I don't know. So ask yourself, like, did they mention like Logan Paul came and ruled everybody? Like, no, they didn't give an example for that. So maybe not A. B says, and therewith disappears also personality and sense of responsibility. Did they mention like due to the numbers, people started killing each other and they didn't take responsibility or anything like that? No, they didn't mention that. C says the adhesion of the crowd is tumultuous, summary, and unconditional. Again, all these are supported and they're talked about a lot, but they didn't offer any like real examples of like someone that actually did this or a crowd that actually did this. So not C either. D says it is impossible for the collectivity to undertake the direct settlement of all controversies that may arise. That's the Peter robs Paul thing. Now, when you're taking this, if you don't remember all of like the examples like I did, I would give you 2 suggestions. Or there's really 2 options to kind of like answer this question. Option number 1, and I bet you a lot of you did it, you go back and you find each of these phrases individually in the passage and you see if there's a real life example, and that takes forever to do. So I wouldn't suggest that if you can get away with it. But if you have the time, then certainly that's one way to get the correct answer. It's just going to eat up a lot of your time. You could end up spending 15 minutes on this passage and then not even have a chance to answer any of the questions on the last passage, and then you're kind of screwed for that. Real secret to getting this question quickly is that you have to be able to understand what they're saying here. Whenever I'm reading this to you and I'm like stopping and summarizing it to you in like layman's terms or Southern terms or whatever y'all want to call it, I actually do that in my brain as I'm reading. Like I'll read something and I'll be like, what the heck does that mean? I'm like, I think they're saying X, Y, and Z. And I'll just go with it because that's my best intuition. I would rather, especially for cars, I would rather have like my own interpretation of something that's only like 85, 90% accurate, but it's in my own words and I truly understand it, than I would just like having their words kind of like sparsely memorized and knowing where to go back to in the passage, because that just takes so long. So when you read this, you have to like break it down into what argument they were giving and then ask yourself like, okay, did they actually offer what the question is asking for, which in this one is a real life example, for that specific argument? And also breaking down those arguments, you're going to remember where those were individually in the passage a lot better than you're going to remember like where one individual line was. Because I couldn't tell you, like I remember this was in the first paragraph because it has this weird word, but like these, I couldn't tell you where they're from. Correct answer is D. Moving on to number 3, it says, suppose the author were asked to advise a newly independent nation about the form of government it should establish. Based on the passage, the author would probably recommend what? So this is definitely a main idea question. What does the author like? The author likes government that's not going to fall prey to these, right? So a monarchy, which decisions are made by one supreme leader. No, I mean, that's like the ultimate influence, right? Like just one person gets to pick. So not A. B says a representative democracy in which decisions are made by a limited number of elected officials. That's small groups, right? So I think the individual would like that. They're elected, so it kind of solve the logistical challenge. And then I guess they would be mildly influenced, so maybe not B, but maybe B. We'll keep it in. C says a direct democracy in which decisions are made by all the adults in the country. I mean, that's just like he spent the entire passage arguing against that, so no to C. And then D says an oligarchy in which decisions are made by a small group of capable individuals. So like small group better than large group, but like the author directly argued against oligarchies, and this is just too much control, so maybe not to D. And that argument against oligarchies is like the first sentence or something. Yeah, against the formation of oligarchical ruling clique, right? So correct answer would be B. Number 4 says, consider that some groups are defined as cults. Members of these extremist sects generally live communally and obey an authoritarian, charismatic leader. Assume that all cults have fewer than 100 members. This information would tend to weaken the passage's assertion about what? So if we look at the main idea, what this is saying is they're setting up cults, like they're drawing this contrast between cults and how the author viewed democracy. And then they're saying which of these punches a hole in the author's argument or in our main idea. And this is a very common way to ask a question. It's literally just like which of these is going to hurt our main idea the most. And what they're saying here is that smaller groups are just as bad as large groups. So that's the hole that's going to get punched, right? So we're just looking for one of those answer choices. A is the ability of great orators to sway large groups. No, that supports the main idea, right? We're looking for one that weakens the main idea. Loss of personality and sense of responsibility. That supports the main idea with the influence. C says difficulties involved in large assemblies. Nope, that supports the logistics portion of that. And then D says reasonableness of small groups compared to large groups. So that's it's punching a hole in small groups compared to large groups. Number 5 says, when using the term the sovereignty of the masses in paragraph 4, the author seems to mean the ability of the masses to. You could technically answer this with the main idea, but whenever they give me like a passage reference, I usually just go and take a peek at it unless I'm running behind on time. So paragraph 4, we're right here. It says, the most formidable argument against the sovereignty of the masses is, however derived from the mechanical and technical impossibility of its realization, the sovereign masses are incapable of undertaking the most necessary resolutions. The impotence of direct democracy, like the power of indirect democracy, is a direct outcome of the influence of numbers. This is saying like you get a big group of people together, they can't decide what to eat. We've all been in the group messages. That's what they're saying. Rephrasing this, they're just asking what this term means. What are they trying to say? They're trying to say you get a bunch of big group of people together, they can't decide what to do. So the ability of the masses to what? I think I highlighted the problem with the sovereignty of the masses, but I guess this question is just asking, when it's saying the ability of the masses rather than the inability, that's kind of how I rephrased it first and I was wrong. When it's saying the ability of the masses, it's saying like, what were they designed to do? What's the goal? And the goal, whenever you get a big group of people together, you're like thinking, oh, we're all going to figure out what we want to eat together, and we're going to choose where we're going to go eat. It's not just Sally who always chooses, like we're going to choose where we go eat. A says, vote in elections that decide who their leaders will be. Well, all of them are the leaders, right? Like that's what a sovereign mass is. Sovereign meaning to like rule over yourself. B says, make every decision concerning their governance. I mean, that's exactly what we're going for. So B is correct. C says, discuss all the potential consequences of specific actions. That's not supported here. Like these questions on the MCAT, they're asking you what was talked about the most. Discussing consequences was not talked about in the passage. D says, understanding the difference between popular orators and natural leaders. No, we didn't discuss that difference. We just talked about how large groups are prey to both popular orators and natural leaders. The correct answer here would be B. I'll see you in the next one.